MouseandJoypad.com bring you another original. It's fucking great.
Halo has meant a great many things to people over the years. Some find it an enjoyable and challenging multiplayer experience, others love the sprawling battles and the large-scale vehicle warfare. For me, it's always been about the co-op gameplay. Sitting with a mate and blasting Covenant, Flood and Promethean scum was the highlight of my Halo career. Halo 5 Guardians has changed, it's evolved, and while it's still recognisable as a Halo game, it's now an entirely different beast. The very first thing that anyone will notice is the tank controls of old are gone, replaced with responsive, fast-paced movement. The long, dangling Halo jump is no more, and I for one am happy about that. With the inclusion of a boost and your ever so aptly named Spartan Charge, you can close the distance with enemies much easier in Halo 5 Guardians, and dodging incoming fire becomes a more realistic goal when you can boost out of its way. This upgraded mobility doesn't just affect the Spartans, oh no, almost every enemy will be able to hop, hover and jump their way to pretty much any location. It means that the old Halo tactic of standing at the side of an obstacle and waiting for your foe to come wandering around the corner is no more. Enemies will just as likely hop over the top and attack you from above. It helps to build vigilance, and it never lets you get too comfortable in your surroundings. To make the mid-ranged combat a bit more interesting, we can now use the Smart Link. This is basically an iron sights crosshair that can be used with any weapon. It makes the frustrating moments from previous games, moments where I had a needler and had to cross a large open battleground, much more versatile. Even the assault rifle, which was never great at range, can now be used effectively at distance to take out a number of enemies. It opens up a new range of options to the player and makes for a more tactical experience all round. The maps have also had a revitalising helping hand. The levels are still fairly linear, but open up in some battles that allow flanking manoeuvres and other tactics. It's a nice change from the borderline shooting galleries of Halo 4. These moments are most noticeable when you command your fire team. You can place a waypoint for your AI companions to hold, whether this is to draw fire to them whilst I was flanking, or to get them to do the legwork whilst I covered from afar. It took a lot of the weight off my shoulders and allowed me to come at the game from what might be the most tactical angle of the series to date. Commanding your squad doesn't stop there. I was able to get my team to use heavy weapon emplacements, get in specific vehicles, focus fire on a specific enemy, and even swap out their weapons. 343 have really made an effort to make Halo 5 Guardians the most tactical installment in the franchise that we've seen. I have to hand it to Microsoft and 343, Halo 5 Guardians looks fantastic, with detailed enemy models and some pretty smooth animations. In some cases the scenery can look a little bland if you're close up, and many of the skyboxes don't quite cut the mustard. There are a few exceptions to this, but by and large it misses the essence of scale, the grandeur that Bungie painstakingly built with the original trilogy. And that's another problem with Halo 5 Guardians. 343 have captured the look of Halo, mostly, but they failed to capture its sense of scale. There are no real moments in Halo 5 Guardians that stand alongside Assault on the Control Room, Metropolis, the Covenant, or The Last Stand in Halo Reach. Don't get me wrong, there are certainly some pitched battles and vehicle combat still exists in a reasonably meaningful way, but it just doesn't capture the large-scale warfare that I'd hoped for. I was pleased with the new additions to the Prometheans. Unlike Halo 4, Guardians has bulked out the roster, adding Promethean soldiers, comparable to elites, and have made the knights like hunters with designated weak spots. It made the Prometheans feel more like an actual race and less like a placeholder, so well done on that 343. I'm sure most people already know that the gameplay is split into two separate fire teams. You begin the game as Spartan Locke, leader of fire team Osiris. You'll also play as the Master Chief and Blue Team. Think of it like playing as the Chief and the Arbiter in Halo 2, only this time there's no differences in loadout or abilities. It was strange playing a large section of the game as someone other than the Chief, but it arguably makes no real difference to the underlying gameplay. It should be public knowledge by now, but Halo 5 Guardians has no local or split screen facilities at all. For the first time in 7 games, you won't be able to sit with a friend and play Halo as a couch co-op. 343 gave plenty of reasons why they were doing an online only co-op mode, but the removal of a series staple still stings. There's also no matchmaking for finding campaign games online, So the drop-in, drop-out facility will only really work if your friends are online. I'm not one for playing with random people online, but unless you have 3 friends who own the game, you won't ever get to play with a full-strength fire team. In many regards, this feels like a step back. Now this is just my personal opinion, but I feel that the move to online is one of the worst decisions that could have been made in the series. It may even be worth flying your UNSC flag at half-mast this week. As the plot has been one of the most focused upon aspects of Halo 5 Guardians, I won't be going into spoiler territory, but there are some issues that I had with it. I'm a fairly big Halo fan. I played all the games including Halo Wars and Spartan Assault, and I've even read a fair number of the books in the expanded universe. When I started playing Halo 5 Guardians, I was lost. It felt as if I'd missed an entire game. I had no context, very little backstory, and as it turns out, an unfounded gripe about the Spartan program. All of this was because Halo 5 Guardians doesn't give a damn about the last few games, and seems to rely heavily on the books. It wasn't too much of a problem after I spent a few hours researching the gaps in my own knowledge, but as a reviewer, that's kind of what I do. I can't see the average gamer going to as much trouble. It feels like a real shame, as a 5-minute cutscene or a little bit of narration could have easily cleared this up. Instead, the onus is on the gamer, and while I appreciate 343 and Microsoft making an effort at a more narratively driven game, it shouldn't be done at the expense of overall cohesion. If you're wondering why everything is going to hell in a level, you'll need to go hunting for intel files. These little data pads became the bane of my life, as it's the only way to get any background exposition on what's going on. These are dotted around each level. Now, you'll inevitably stumble into a few of these, but to find them all, you'll have to go hunting. I think I spent more time exploring each level looking for these intel files and skulls than I spent fighting the enemy. And that's just not cool, 343. Much of the in-game dialogue happens during combat. This meant I missed great chunks of what was being said behind the sounds of gunfire, cries for help, and explosions. I ended up turning on the subtitles, just so that I wasn't missing out. There was definitely an issue of balance between storytelling and gameplay that 343 haven't quite gotten right. And another big change to the gameplay. If you die, your team has the chance to revive you. It takes much of the danger out of the game. In most cases, my team would come to my aid if I got a little gung-ho. It makes the game flow more easily by removing constant respawns, but it loses a lot of the risk-reward factor. My time with Halo 5 Guardians was spent prior to the game's launch. As a result, many of the multiplayer facilities weren't quite running at full capacity. I was unable to find a co-op game in the few days prior to launch, but I think this may be where the true measure of Halo 5 Guardians is shown. I have high hopes in this regard. The 2 PvP game modes that I had access to, now there will be more after the official release date, were Arena and Warzone. Due to the limited number of review copies, multiplayer matches were scheduled over 3 days. Sadly, I was unable to play a full game of Warzone as there were never enough players online when I tried. I did play Warzone at EGX in September, and have to say that I enjoyed the large-scale warfare on offer. 2 teams of 20 battle it out with vehicles and AI. It really was great fun and embodied much of what the campaign was missing. I did manage to get a few games of Arena, your standard team deathmatch. If you played the beta, then you'll be largely at home here. The combat is much faster paced and frantic than previous Halo games, and it's clear that games such as Titanfall have had an impact on the mobility elements. I did have some balance issues and latency on some matches, but this may be down to my own terrible internet connection or the fact that the servers were still being fine-tuned. Halo 5 Guardians takes a bold step away from Bungie's formula. The formula that has made Halo one of the biggest franchises in gaming. It's a step away from the old ways of gameplay over plot, of grand battles you don't fully understand why you're fighting. It's a brave move from 343, a move that could have paid off, cementing their place as the new owners of the Halo IP. Sadly, it hasn't worked out that way. In changing the layout, the formula, the very lifeblood of Halo, they have made an above average, even a great first person shooter, but it lacks the Halo essence, it lacks soul. It's not the case that Halo 5 Guardians is a bad game, it's just a different kind of game. A more streamlined game, a more engaging game in some regards, but it just doesn't feel like Halo. Halo 5 Guardians is a very worthy effort by 343. There are issues with the plot and backstory, but the fundamental gameplay is fun and engaging. Combat is much more versatile than it has ever been before, and the freedom of movement is something to be applauded. Halo 5 Guardians lacks the sense of scale and grandeur that we've come to expect from the franchise, and the lack of a standout level is a disappointment, but by far the biggest mistake is the removal of the local co-op. A series staple for over a decade has been removed, and its loss is keenly felt.